Three.
When you are.
To what? Record?
Okay. We are going to have a town meeting with the civilians of Kenton in Mississippi, in which we want to enlighten the civilians of that town about the recent happenings in court, and we would like to discuss with them the matter of tolerance towards Afro-Americans. The civilians will include rednecks as well as Afro-Americans and neutral white persons. Our purpose is to create an image of the way many Americans in the southern states of America, in particular Mississippi, regarded the black race in the late 20th century. And we want to convince the people that racism cannot be tolerated in any way.
Well, Daniel over here will be the spokesman for the people in the town. He wants clarification about the issues, and he wants answers towards statements and arguments he heard in court. At the beginning he's very neutral, but as in the court it proceeds, his perspective will change. Naftali will be a black sympathizer who's trying decently to help the black people to be more evaluated members of the society. He's white himself. I'll be a black person representing all the black people in the community. But before we start, I would like to tell you guys something about the situation in Mississippi in 1985 and earlier. Do you guys all know about the Jim Crow laws? Well, the Jim Crow laws were the law of segregation of blacks from the whites in public buildings. And at that time, the segregation was desegregation was just the law was just gone, and but the black and white still kept to their own restaurants, neighborhoods, and so on. At that time, Mississippi was America's most reactionary state during the civil rights movement. The Ku Klux Klan played a very important role as they murdered a lot of black people in the community, but it was unknown until the FBI assigned an investigator to investigate these murders. Though Mississippi is known to have made strides to improve the civil rights record in recent years, its recent spark and equality for people of color, it does still remain.
Okay, so now we're starting with our town meeting.
Dear folks, last week in our courthouse, an African-American man called Mr. Carl Lee Haley stood for trial because he was accused of murdering two Caucasian men in the city of Kenton. Jake Brigance, a lawyer, defended Mr. Haley in court, and Mr. Rufus Buckley represented the public prosecutor in court. At the beginning of the trial, Mr. Haley was asked by the judge if he would plead guilty or not guilty. Without any hesitation, he replied, "Not guilty, Your Honor." Then the trial began. Mr. Buckley immediately tried to convince the jury why they should convict Mr. Haley of murder. In reaction to that, Mr. Brigance, he tried to prove to the jury that Mr. Haley was insane at the moment of the murder on the two Caucasian men. After a long and fair trial, after a lot of questionings and after a lot of psychological mind games, both lawyers got one more opportunity to try to convince the jury why they should convict Mr. Haley of murder or not. Eventually, as you all might know, the jury's verdict was not guilty because they believed Mr. Haley was insane at the moment of the murder on those two Caucasian men. I hope I have enlightened you enough on this trial.
Well, Daniel, I think this was a huge step for us Americans, especially a great step for the African Americans. In a lot of these trials, there's nothing to do whether, in this case, Mr. Haley was guilty or not. It was again the black guy being portrayed as the bad guy. I'm glad to hear that Mr. Haley was convicted not guilty, although I don't think it's good to kill somebody. I've heard in the last few years a lot of these trials around Mississippi, and all of the black murderers were convicted guilty, and the white people didn't even got a trial. And I think this act of vengeance is not appropriate to do. I don't think it's appropriate to be God. but neither is raping a little girl. I think I would have done the same if it was my little girl.
Well, now we're going to take a look at some quotations. In the courtroom, I was the only one present of our three in the courtroom, and both lawyers and Mr. Haley himself had some very interesting quotations. This is the first one I picked out because I want to discuss it with you guys and know what your opinion is on it. It's, if you win this case, justice will prevail. And if you lose this case, justice will also prevail. Now that's a strange case.
Well, Daniel, this quotation is one of the most contradictory and wise quotations I've heard lately. On one hand, if Mr. Haley is being sentenced to death, justice has prevailed, as he has committed murder on two men, and should be punished as the law prescribes. On the other hand, you could imagine why Mr. Haley murdered those two gentlemen. Most people would have done the same, and therefore we should make a very hard decision. I think we shouldn't listen to what the law prescribes us. Look at it, the white guys got away with it. I think we should listen to our hearts instead of listen to our brains.
What I think he meant there is that winning the case would have the immediate result of Carl Lee Haley being set free. His actions would be pardoned because of his moral right as a father to protect his daughter, no matter what cost, and that cost was in this case life imprisonment or even death. The murder of the two redneck boys, however, would then be justified because of his duty as a father to prevent anything like this happening to his daughter in the future. Losing the case would mean that Carl Lee Haley would be tried for the murder of two redneck boys, and in that case the law would prevail because of a murder, no matter what motive was behind the murder. So it is a very interesting quotation.
Another quotation by Mr. Haley in court was, "America has a wall and you're on the other side." He says this to his own lawyer. In my opinion, this quotation by Mr. Haley should be taken very seriously, because Mr. Haley actually dares to stand up and tell us what's actually going wrong in the United States at this very moment. He is behind prison walls, prison bars, because he has committed a murder on two Caucasian men who have raped, tortured and almost killed his 10-year-old daughter. Well, some might say this is a fair decision, but others will say and have the empathy to understand why Mr. Haley has committed these murders. In my opinion, he uses America as a metaphor. The prison is actually what he means. He calls the prison America. America, the land of the free where everybody can live in freedom. But his freedom is between the prison bars. That little space between the prison bars is his freedom in America. But also in his country, people get locked up for committing a crime that most parents or fathers will think of, when their child is being treated in a way Mr. Haley's 10-year-old daughter was.
Okay. Well, Carl Lee Haley said this in the context of him and his lawyer Jake Brugans discussing the hopes of their children ever being able to play together. What I believe he meant there is that the citizens of America have an attitude towards Negroes that somehow cannot be justified. Although Negroes theoretically have the same rights as white people, practice learns that often that is not the case. In the state of Mississippi, still is a system of segregation, which means that black people don't have the same opportunities and chances as white people have. Black people still live in ghettos. Black people still get treated differently, and being black still has negative consequences in the society of Canton, as well as in many other towns and cities in Minnesota. According to many judges and politicians nowadays, it is still not a contradiction to the Constitution, and therefore segregation is a legal, legitimate system in their eyes. But I think they were wrong. What Carl Lee Haley has been trying to say is that as long as people, Americans in this case, are thinking of black and white as two different races instead of one, that we are creating an obstacle for ourselves. We are disabling ourselves from joining as one race, as one nation.
Another quotation by Mr. Haley. Nigger, Negro, black, African American. No matter how you see me different. You see me like the jury sees me. You are them. Folks, this quotation is reality in our time. No matter how you see me different. No matter who I am, you will never like me. No matter how hard I try, I will never succeed. These three sentences all mean the same and express the feeling of the African American community in our time. But it also shows how biased the jury was. Let's take a look at it. You see me like the jury sees me. You see me different. That means that the jury is very biased. If the jury will not regard him as one of them, then his fate will be settled. No one can help him but God. And if he regards his Caucasian lawyer to one of them, he actually hasn't got a lot of faith in his own lawyer, his own Caucasian lawyer, which he chose. And he hasn't got a lot of trust in this case that justice will prevail and he will live as a free man again.
I agree on that. I think this enumeration used by Mr. Haley emphasizes the situation around here in Mississippi. All the white people, even the jury, they all see us the same. I heard them talking about it in the stores, you know. They said, you can't blame a nigger for being a nigger. No more than you can blame a dog for being a dog. I heard them say that behind my back. How is it a fair trial? How can it be a fair trial when the jury is all white? They might even be racist as well. Part of the Ku Klux Klan members. Why do you think he has been convicted not guilty? Because he was insane? Do you think this is coincidence? It was the only way for us as black people to elude the death. They just see us as another kind. We gotta change this. The Jim Crow laws do not longer exist, and it's time for us, humanity, to treat all races equally.
Okay, folks, citizens of Canton, now we're going to take a look at some footage taken at the court and during the trial of Mr. Haley. Yes.
Sound. Good sound.
This is not the footage.
Prior. I want to tell you a story. I'm going to ask you all to close your eyes. I'll tell you the story. I want you to listen to me. I want you to listen to yourselves. Go ahead. Close your eyes, please. This is a story about a little girl walking home from the grocery store one sunny afternoon. I want you to picture this little girl. Suddenly a truck races on. Two men jump out and grab her. They drag her into a nearby field. And they tie her up. And they rip her clothes from her body. Now they climb on. First one, then the other. Raping her. Shattering everything innocent and pure. Vicious thrust. A fog of drunken breath and sweat. When they're done, after they've killed her tiny womb, murdered any chance for her to bear children, to have life beyond her own, they decide to use her for target practice. So they start throwing full beer cans at her. They throw them so hard that it tears the flesh all the way to her bones. And they urinate on her. Now comes the hanging. They have a rope. They tie a noose. Imagine the noose pulling tight around your neck. And a sudden blind jerk. She's pulled into the air and her feet and legs go kicking. They don't find the ground. The hanging branch isn't strong enough. It snaps and she falls back to the earth. They pick her up, throw her in the back of the truck, drive out to Foggy Creek Bridge, pitch her over the edge. She drops some 30 feet down to the creek bottom below. Can you see her? Raped, eaten, broken body, soaked in their urine, soaked in their semen, soaked in her blood, left to die. Can you see her? I want you to picture a little girl now imagine she's white.
Mr. Brigand's plea was one of the most emotional pleas and one of the best pleas I've witnessed in my entire life. He actually tried to make a racial problem, the girl being black, into a non-racial problem. Because all of a sudden, that little girl, the daughter of Mr. Haley, wasn't black anymore. She was white. He had the guts to change the color of her skin. Something that most lawyers wouldn't even think of. But then, and only then, the jury realized that this couldn't have only happened to a black girl, but also to a white girl. This was an eye-opener for them. They finally stimulated their ability to empathize with the accused one, Mr. Haley, and therefore they could make the right decision, could they think straight again, and make the decision to make a verdict, to come up with a verdict of not guilty. And Mr. Haley got the punishment he deserved. Not the punishment of getting imprisoned, but the punishment of living in freedom with a molested daughter, with a daughter who is not able to make babies anymore. That's his punishment. We shouldn't make it any harder. We shouldn't decide to give him a punishment that's not beneficial for him. This is bad enough for him.
In telling this story, Jake Brigand is constantly working towards the climax. He tells the story of little Tanya, the 10-year-old girl who got raped. She got humiliated, she got peed on. Then, those redneck boys even tried to hang her. He asked the jury to close their eyes to make sure that they are creating a vivid image of the scenery in their minds. And just about when it seems like it couldn't get any worse, he asked the jury one more dazzling favor. He says to them, "Now imagine that she being white." With these words, he managed to confrontate the jury with their bias, with their influenced way of thinking, which they would so gladly deny. Every single one of the 12 jury members realized that they had indeed been picturing a black girl, as the girl had undergone all these horrible violations. But why? Because no person would have ever dared to do the same thing to a white girl. In the state of Mississippi, people get hanged instantly for raping a 10-year-old white girl. Well, as we all know and have witnessed in earlier trials, this was not the case for black girls. That's why Carl Lee Haley took justice in his own hands. Jake had finally reached his goal by convincing the people in that courtroom that justice could be made equal for both black and white people. If only those people would be triggered by some impulse, and that impulse, that stimulus, was in this case his final plea. While the jury had earlier secretly, unanimously voted in favor of the gas chambers for Carl Lee Haley, they now decided that he was not guilty because he had opened their eyes for them. Well, before we all going to be going our own ways again after this night, I would like to call upon you, the people of Canton, to help us cleanse the name of our town and say no to racism.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.
Feedback.
It was really interesting.
Have any of you seen the movie prior to this clip?
A Time to Kill is, yeah.
About 4 or 5 Academy Awards in there.
It is definitely worth watching.
It's one of Matthew McConaughey's first real parts. But any other feedback, comments?
They did a lot by heart, which I think is very impressive because
Yeah,
there
usually
were
knows
really
very
long
little.
parts of text.
Hard to be very convincing, especially in that kind of role if you're reading
Yeah.
the text. They did the job. Anything else?
Well, roughly sometimes, or we used a couple of times redneck. That's also a bit offensive.
So you
Maybe
should
people-
try to think a more appropriate term for your position.
Okay,
Yes, they may be that, but not all rednecks are racist.
that's true, yeah.
Stereotype.
Yeah, you should. But if that was your intent, that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, if your character was trying to do that, then it's fine.
Okay.
You know, it depends. You know, if you're coming in anger because you consider all the people who are doing it to be redneck.
That was not my intent, so.
But
we
it
will-
could have been.
We will all trade it, yeah.
Yeah, but it could have been. Any other feedback? Could use a little more analysis, but the rest was
Yeah.
good. You know,
Was
you-
our plan for the next time.
Yeah, but that's it. I mean, really, I think that's my main comment, that you need a little more analysis of his language used, or you even may want a couple more, not just trial quotes, but quotes from the accused or quotes from someone else where, from the other side, making racist comments and saying how that could impact, or it did impact, the public view. And then I think it would be very complete, and that would fill in.
Well, we did discuss the fact of adding some racist opinions in there, but
You should.
we couldn't get any further than he's not allowed to do anything like it because he's black.
No, but if you look, you can go to the archives of some of the newspapers, and there's a lot more information about the real trial. And there were, even in the newspaper itself, there's some pretty racist content.
Okay, thank you.
You know, and you could say, even the newspaper at the time ran this, here's a part of an article from the newspaper at the time. As you can see, the bias in the media trying to manipulate public opinion by saying that, it was just a nigger girl. Who cares?
No.
It's not like it was a senator's daughter or something. And it would add, and then you could analyze that and its impact in how it did. Any other feedback? So far, you've been pretty good orders. Make sure I get when your final clip, and I'll make sure you get this. Just put everything back. Thanks.